General pour son rapport d'aujourd'hui sur la gestion des urgences de la communauté des Premières Nations. La BVG fait un travail d'une importance capitale. Service aux Autochtones Canada accueille et accepte toutes les recommendations du rapport. As many people know, First Nations are at increased risk from threats posed by natural hazards, from floods to wildfires to extreme weather events. And with climate change, these threats are increasing in severity and frequency. We've seen many examples over the past year with the atmospheric flooding in BC, flooding in Manitoba earlier this year, and most recently with Hurricane Fiona in the Atlantic region. And the report has highlighted that there are gaps that need to be addressed, primarily in the prevention and mitigation efforts, in the planning and emergency planning, management plans, in building capacity amongst communities, in the infrastructure needs of communities, and of course on service delivery. And these gaps are well known. Indeed, partners continue to advocate that we all do better together. And the partners are obviously First Nations communities, the federal government, but also, importantly, the provincial governments, where many of the responses lay as well. Much of my work as a minister is to continue to press for the service delivery transformation that we need and the additional investments that will be required so that we can collectively be prepared in advance of these adverse weather events. And First Nations leaders have what they need, and they have the confidence that they have what they need in order to prepare, to protect people, and to protect the infrastructure in the communities that they're responsible for. And the good news is that there is a lot of work underway between Indigenous Services Canada and First Nations partners to align with the recommendations that the Auditor General has pointed out in her report. There are some examples of that work that I can give you today. For example, we are working on trilateral arrangements in emergency management response with First Nations in BC and indeed the province of BC, stemming from the atmospheric river conditions that led to widespread devastation for so many communities. The First Nations in BC and the province both see a high degree of value in working together on arrangements that will strengthen the ability to plan for these events and respond to them in their eventuality. We also supported Kashechewan First Nation to use a different approach to manage fairly cyclical flooding situations that have happened in that community for a long time. The community was empowered through a variety of mechanisms to use a self-determined approach that included on-the-land-based initiatives that allowed people to avoid the need to evacuate. And of course, evacuations is one of the most stressful things that can happen to a community and their members. I come from Thunder Bay, Ontario, which routinely hosts evacuees from a variety of environmental, climate-driven situations like forest fires, for example, and flooding. And I can tell you that it's very, very stressful for communities when entire communities have to evacuate. So these approaches that are self-determined and that are designed by communities that often draw on generations and indeed since time immemorial knowledge of the land are ones that are very promising in nature. First Nations people have indicated that what they need is better supports in terms of the planning, the system work, and the emergency management, and through the spirit of self-determination, so that First Nations leaders and communities have the tools that they need to increasingly have control over how community members are both supported to prepare for emergencies, but also to manage them when they happen. And as I mentioned earlier, responding to emergencies is a shared jurisdictional space with First Nations, provincial, and federal governments needing to work in partnership, and I would add municipalities as well in many cases. So we fully agree with the Auditor General's report. I think that what it says to the Government of Canada is that this work has to happen more quickly. We are seeing unprecedented climate change effect, in particular First Nations communities around the country, and we need to get ahead of that curve in order to be able to support communities to have better planning and better resources to manage the climate events that undoubtedly are going to be more frequent in nature. So I thank again the Auditor General for this report, and Indigenous Services Canada accepts and agrees with all of the recommendations. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. As the Minister of Transport, the safety and security of Canada's Arctic waters is one of my top priorities. In fact, it's one of our government's top priorities. I'm pleased today to welcome the Auditor General report on our government's efforts related to the surveillance of Arctic waters. Our government agrees with the findings and recommendations in the report and will take steps to address them. We are committed to working with our partners to address long-standing gaps in Arctic maritime domain awareness. This includes the continuous tracking of vessels and the identification of non-emitting vessels, as well as improving information sharing between our partners to ensure our Arctic waters remain safe and secure. Canada's maritime domain awareness Canada's maritime domain awareness in the Arctic is critical to ensuring that our country can mitigate risks and respond to incidents that may impact our security. To support this commitment, we will continue to work closely with our partners to provide the necessary support needed to ensure our security in the region. I want to thank, once again, the Office of the Auditor General for their work in preparing this report, and I look forward to working with our partners for next steps. Thank you. Now I'll pass it to Minister Hussen.
Thank you so much, Mr. Alghabra. Hello, everyone. I want to begin by saying that I also welcome the findings and the recommendations of this report. Let me be absolutely clear that we as a government continue to believe that everyone in Canada has the right to a safe and affordable place to call home that meets their needs. Though we've made progress, we must continue to be unrelenting in our efforts to end chronic homelessness in Canada once and for all, and that means continuing to speed up data collection, analysis, reporting, and improving accountability. In saying this, the Government of Canada recently launched the results reporting online system to help capture data on chronic homelessness, and the system is being strengthened. To add to this, Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation and the Infrastructure Canada will work together with departments to improve accountability as we continue to prevent and reduce and eventually eliminate chronic homelessness. Reaching home, Canada's homelessness strategy has made an impact. And I can think about how, for example, it's helped the Ally Center in Nova Scotia, Sydney, Nova Scotia, extend its hours to even help more people. This is among many, many organizations that have used this program to help prevent over 62,000 people from becoming homeless and house an additional 32,000 others who are in fact experiencing homelessness. So there is more work to be done. We will continue to work towards ending chronic homelessness together with our partners across the country, and I look forward to implementing all the recommendations of the Auditor General. Over to you, Minister.
Bonjour, good afternoon. As President of the Treasury Board, I welcome the Auditor General's report on cybersecurity of personal information in the cloud. The Government of Canada has put in place effective safeguards to protect information stored in the cloud. However, the Auditor General's report highlights the additional diligences needed to ensure they are consistently applied and monitored. And we are still in the early stages of our adoption with the cloud, and these recommendations are part of maturing our processes. Et nous sommes d'accord avec les conclusions et les recommandations du rapport et nous prenons au sérieux les mesures pour y répondre. La cybersécurité est un effort continu et nous sommes déterminés à protéger les données personnelles et la vie privée des Canadiens et des Canadiennes. Vous savez, ces efforts sont essentiels alors que nous continuons à adopter la technologie du nuage pour soutenir la modernisation numérique des services gouvernementaux offerts aux Canadiens. Merci.
Madame Fortier, le fil conducteur, pardonnez-moi, c'est
Oh, just 10 minutes for Q&A.
Le fil conducteur du rapport de la vérificatrice générale, c'est que le gouvernement semble incapable d'avoir les données qui l'aident à prendre des bonnes décisions et ensuite de ça, de mettre ces décisions-là en place. Quand le gouvernement libéral a été élu, vous avez promis la délivrologie. Est-ce que ce n'est pas un échec, un constat d'échec en entier de votre gouvernement, ce rapport-là aujourd'hui?
Je pense que c'est important de recevoir, premièrement, toutes les recommandations de la vérificatrice générale en sachant qu'on a toujours des efforts à faire et on va continuer à le faire avec les recommandations qu'elle nous donne.
Mais donc, ce n'est pas un échec de votre gouvernement. Vous ne croyez pas que vous
Je
allez
pense
échouer?
qu'il faut plutôt regarder au fait que nous avons beaucoup de pain sur la planche, il y a beaucoup d'efforts qui se font. Et évidemment, lorsque la vérificatrice générale regarde certains de ces travaux que nous faisons, elle nous met de l'avant des éléments que nous devons travailler et c'est exactement ce que nous allons faire. Nous allons recevoir les recommandations comme nous l'avons fait aujourd'hui et continuer à faire mieux pour les Canadiennes et les Canadiens.
Minister Hajdu, the Attorney General, or rather the Auditor General, seemed frustrated about the lack of action on your file. These gaps have been well known for quite a while now. There's more than 100 projects that have been eligible that have not gotten any funding. Your department seems to be saying it doesn't have money to fund all these projects, and yet it's spending 3.5 times on reacting rather than preventing. It seems a little backwards. So how do you explain not getting ahead of those projects and funding mitigation instead of just constantly being in reaction?
I think that's the constant tension between shifting to a prevention model from a response model. And you're absolutely right to point out that it's an astronomical expense that is facing the Government of Canada in terms of responding to crises. These are expensive responses. They require removing people from the community, sometimes en masse. They require oftentimes emergency responses and extraordinary kinds of measures that put a huge strain on everybody's budget and capacity, by the way. The challenge is getting all of our minds oriented towards a prevention adaptation approach while also having enough in reserve to be able to respond to these crises. So it's about shifting the way that we think about it, and there will be a transition period where you're spending a lot on responding to emergencies and a lot on getting communities ready to be more prepared and have more adaptation strategies. It is also work that's done with provinces, as you know, because there's a huge intersection in terms of emergency responses with provincial governments, and it's really encouraging to see BC out of the gate, understanding that and working so closely at this tripartite approach with First Nations and the federal government with a full understanding that this will alleviate costs on all systems and potentially, obviously, save lives and improve the quality of life. Manitoba has also expressed interest in this approach because of the significant flooding that many First Nations face there. So we're hoping to get some momentum with provinces understanding that this really is going to be an all-hands-on-deck sort of shift from reaction only in rare circumstances to the prevention and adaptation that's going to be required as we see increasing events like this every single year.
Minister Hussen, actually, if I may have a follow-up. We're hearing today as well that Infrastructure Canada and CMHC have spent billions trying to fight chronic homelessness, and yet we don't seem to have any data to show whether or not those billions are having the impact that we hope that they will have. So how do you explain such an obvious data gap?
Through Reaching Home, we've helped numerous organizations across the country to prevent thousands of people from actually entering homelessness, and then tens of thousands more to actually exit homelessness and find permanent housing. But we know that there's more work to be done, and I commit to I thank the Auditor General for the performance audit of the programs to tackle chronic homelessness, and we committed to implement the audit.
The report says that they're not sufficiently cooperating, and as my colleague said here, not even aware of what the outcomes are of their investments. Are you going to be asking for improvements?
Absolutely. The Reaching Home was launched in 2019, soon after the pandemic hit, and we were working with community groups who were facing the unprecedented challenge of dealing with the pandemic and the additional challenges that created with an already challenging situation. And so at the time, they had difficulties in terms of collecting the data, analyzing it, reporting it back to us. And so that had an impact on the program. But our government and the community entities are working together to make sure that we not only collect better data, but also analyze it and report it back to the federal government. At the time, the focus was on making sure that people could weather the storm and that we prevented folks from entering homelessness, and those who were in shelters would have access to more space, social distancing, more beds, access to PPE and other necessary things that needed to happen at the time, and that's what most of the money went to. The reporting was challenging for them, but ever since we've implemented measures to make sure that we have better reporting.
I do not hear a mea culpa in there. You've been spending billions of dollars to find homelessness, and you don't even have the data to know if it works or not, if it's getting better or worse. Why are you not more apologetic?
We do have some data. We know that we prevented 64,000 people from entering homelessness, and we know that data because the community entities actually reported that.
So is homelessness getting better? Then what's the data?
If I can just finish, we also helped house permanently 32,000 people who were experiencing homelessness through the pandemic. And then through the Rapid Housing Initiative, which we launched in 2020, we know how many permanently affordable, rapidly built housing units that have been produced since then, 10,250. And due to the announcement that I made on Thursday for the third one, we will produce another at least 4,500 units. So that is a total
homelessness getting
over
better or worse? Do you have this answer?
We have to do a better job, as I said, collecting the data. We have recently launched the results reporting online system. This will help provide better tools and more flexible tools to community entities to report the data, to collect it, and to analyze it. And we launched that first phase this year, and the second phase in November of 2022. This will help shape the program, allow us to have more granular data. But absolutely, these programs are having an impact, and I've given you some of those numbers, and I can give you even more. The fact of the matter is we need to do better in terms of the collection and the analysis, yes, and that part of that depends on the community entities, and they were facing the challenges of COVID, and we understand. And so now, with hopefully coming out of the pandemic, the entities will be in a better situation to provide us with more granular data to report back to Canadians. But we will, of course, implement all the recommendations.
Presumably, as the housing minister, you're aware of your own government's target of reducing housing homelessness by 50%, right? So you set a number target for yourself.
Yes.
And so I'm just wondering, as minister, were you at no point asking your department, hey, I'd like an update, where are we at? Are we...
Of course, absolutely. But as I said, at the time, when this program was launched in 2019, soon after that, COVID hit us, and the community entities were faced with the challenge of really stepping up to collect this data while dealing with preventing homelessness and also finding ways to handle the populations that were experiencing homelessness, to procure more space for them, to procure more PPE, to procure more beds. Their focus of these community entities, 64 community entities across the country, 1,000 organizations help through this program every year. Their focus was on getting people to weather the storm and get them through COVID, so that we didn't have outbreaks in shelters and in transitional homes. And I think by and large they've succeeded, and we increased the Reaching Home dollars precisely to help them do that, and launched the Rapid Housing Initiative so that people can have access to permanent housing. Now that they've done that part, we need to work with them to provide them the tools necessary so that they can report those that feedback to us in terms of how many people on a granular level are being provided.
I understand, but the Auditor General said that this is an issue across the government, that it's not just when it comes to chronic homelessness, that there's no data, and so she can't assess what the government's doing and how well it's doing what it promises to do. So given the ambitious goals that this government sets for itself, you know, how do you expect Canadians to trust that you're able to deliver on anything?
Well, Canadians can, I disagree with the premise of your question. We have some data. We don't have as granular data that we would like, and we are working on it through the results and the reporting mechanisms that we've put in place now. So we're already implementing some of the recommendations from the Auditor General. But the fact of the matter is we prevented 64,000 people through our programming in COVID to not experience homelessness. And we housed permanently another 32,000 people who were experiencing homelessness. And through the Rapid Housing Initiative, I can tell you the exact number of units that we've created, which target the most vulnerable people in our society, those experiencing homelessness and those who are at risk of experiencing homelessness. That is a program that has far exceeded its targets, and that is why we've continued with the third round. But absolutely, there's more work to be done, and we will implement the recommendations to make sure that we have better data and better reporting and better collection by providing the community entities the tools that they need to do exactly.
Thank you, everyone. Merci tout le monde.
Non, on a d'autres questions sur l'article, notamment some question on the Arctic, right? There's a lot of questions to be asked about that. Specifically, how are we going to monitor our northern waters when greater side is down? We don't have any more vessels to patrol. How concerned are you that we are leaving that entire swath of our land wide open?
So first of all, it's not accurate to say that it's wide open and it's not being monitored. It is being monitored. The Auditor General highlighted areas of improvement. In fact, the Auditor General did say that there's been a lot of improvement that's taking place, but more needs to be done. And more is being done. And I can talk about some of the initiatives that are ongoing and will be happening. Next year, we're expecting the receipt of a new commercial drone that will help us survey the Arctic. The Department of Fisheries and Oceans, icebreakers on order that will be deployed. We at Transport Canada are building a hangar in Iqaluit to enable to expand the -7 NAS program. So a lot of work that has taken place, more work is ongoing. We're also currently reviewing regulations for the type of water safety and security that we need in the Arctic. So yeah, it is being surveyed, but more can be done and more is being done.
So are you concerned about the blind spots we have?
We're in a totally different world today than where we were before. And the safety of our Arctic water is a priority for us. And indeed, because we are in a different world, we need to identify new technologies, new methods to deploy to ensure that we have safe Arctic waters. And we're working on that. Thank you.
Merci, M.